Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Through Their Eyes. Today, we have a very special guest, and I'm very excited. But before we get started with today's episode, I do want to let everybody know that we can call in at 919-518-9773 or Computers 2K Voice on Skype. I am your co host, Emily Larios, and let's get started.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I am the other co host of the Through Their Eyes podcast, Josh. And today I'm super excited for this episode because we have an amazing guest speaker. So we're going to be introducing Yasha Nagathan. She is currently one of the state vice presidents in North Carolina for the Future Business Leaders of America organization. So I'm a part of Future Business Leaders of America too. They are an incredible organization that gives students the opportunities to get exposed to business fields through fun competitions, workshops, and events. So, with that being said, Yasha, can you just give us like a brief description about who you are, some of the things you do, and we can get talking from there?
Sure, Josh, I'd be happy to. And thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Yasha Nagathan. And like Joshua mentioned, I currently serve as the NC-FBLA Triangle State Vice President. I've been in FBLA Future Business Leaders of America for over 5 years now. And I've had the honor of serving the organization at the local, state, and national levels as a chapter officer, as a state officer, and as a national FBLA council member. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about my leadership journey, and I hope to inspire all the teens and everyone here who's watching that leadership truly has no age limit.
Yeah, then with that being said, I think I want to kick it off straight off what you said, Yasha. So, if you don't mind, actually, this is just the first thing that I'm curious about. What encouraged you to have the motto "Leadership has no age limit"? I mean, what kind of motivated you to spread that message? Because I think it's super important, especially for teenagers now. It's very easy to get caught in limiting beliefs, but there's so much potential for things you can do even while you're still in middle school and high school. So, where did that kind of come from?
So when I was younger, I was always a very extroverted kid, and I would always, be talking. Even when I was like a toddler, I would be talking to people at grocery stores, and I never had like that limiting mentality as an elementary schooler. And my mom, she's always been my biggest inspiration, and me and my mom are really close, and she's always been my mentor. And she told me that you don't have to be an adult to take initiative, and she's the one who helped ingrain in me that leadership has no age limit. And my interest in business sparked when I participated in the Raleigh Children's Business Fair. And in that business fair, I won the Best Business Potential Award. And this was a business fair where kids from all ages, from elementary school to high school, created their own business and pitched their idea and actually sold products to the city of the people in our area. And that was an amazing experience for me because I got my first exposure to business, and I realized, wow, this is something I love. I love taking initiative. I love doing entrepreneurial things like this. And then I found out about FBLA in fifth grade, but my local middle school did not have an FBLA chapter. So I decided to go to a magnet school that was about an hour and a half away, bus ride from my house. But I can say that that was the best decision I've ever made because through FBLA and through all the different leadership positions I've held and initiatives I've started, that's helped me realize that leadership has no age limit. And I realized that from a young age. And then it became my mission to spread that message to not only the teens in my area, but in the state and in the nation. And recently, I was invited to host a workshop at the FBLA National Leadership Conference in Atlanta. And that workshop was titled Leadership Has No Age Limit.
Wow, I mean, that's awesome. If you don't mind me, I'm just curious. So, when you were first introduced to FBLA in fifth grade, what did they? I know you said you had like that entrepreneurial drive, but what about it made you like think it's worth? I'm gonna go to this school that's an hour and a half away for this club. Like, what made that? What gave you that motivation?
I think the biggest driving factor for me was that FBLA was not only a club, but it was a community. And I realized that I could be part of this community where there would be other students like me, other kids who are passionate about business, but also not only are we united by that passion to make a change and a passion for entrepreneurship, but also we're all so different. And as I've grown throughout the organization, I've met so many people from across the country, and I've been able to learn from all the people that I've met. So I think the driving factor for me was that, wow, I can be part of an organization where I can meet so many like minded people like me and I can join this community of future business leaders who want to make an impact in the world.
I'm curious, what about leadership appeals to you? Because I feel like there's so many different personality types in the world, but what is it about leadership in particular that makes you gravitate towards it so much?
To me, I really think that leadership is about inspiring others. For me, when my mission on leadership and my mission to spread this message, my goal is to inspire other people, especially inspire other teens. And my little motto is that if you've inspired someone, it doesn't matter how big or small your leadership position is or your title is, that is to me the definition of true leadership. So I think that being a leader is about inspiring the people who you lead to become the next generation of leaders, to leave. So my goal is to leave FBLA better than I found it. And I hope to inspire others, not only in FBLA, but in the other leadership positions I hold and the other activities I participate in. No matter how big or small you feel your title is, we all started somewhere. I started as a member. All the great CEOs, all the great leaders in our world have all started as members, started from the beginning. And I think it's important to realize that it's about taking the initiative to make the organization you're in, make the world around you a better place. And that's what, to me, that's what gravitates me towards leadership.
I think that's really beautifully put. I think there's this one phrase that goes that we have to be the change that we want to see in the world, and I think that's very like reminiscent of that, and I think that's really beautifully put. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Mahatma Gandhi was the one who quoted that. I think it's a pretty famous quote. I've seen that a lot, on the motivational posters and on motivational quotes. But I agree. I think that is such an inspirational message. And that is also what I like to carry along with leadership has no age limit. You don't have to be an adult to make the change you want to see in the world.
And on that note too, Yasha, like when you're covering this topic of leadership has no age limit, what about the way things currently are? Why do you think that sometimes like, kids and people that are younger get stuck in that mindset that they can't do certain things because they're not old enough? Like what would you say you think like causes that in the first place?
I think sometimes what can cause that mentality is sometimes the environment that the kids in, and sometimes there's not an opportunity for them to take that initiative. And that's why I loved FBLA so much, because I realized this was a community, this was an organization where I could make change, where change was invited. Leadership was what the club's mission and what the club was about. So I do think that sometimes it's hard to be that change. It's hard to take that leadership in the environment that you're in. And that's why I think joining clubs, joining organizations like FBLA is so important, because it gives you that opportunity to take the lead and take that step up.
Okay, well, I think that was very well put. I mean, I would say I'd have to definitely agree about environment. I think that a lot of the time people don't take into account, certain things that come easier and harder to people, right? And I think leadership's an interesting topic too because there's so many different personality types. Some people they kind of don't want to lead. They want to be able to do their best following a certain objective. Other people like in your case too, you want to inspire people. And I definitely think environment has like a critical role to play in there. But I guess the only thing I'd want to add on to that is, I think sometimes when people are in certain situations, they're scared to take that initiative. Let's just say somebody has, they're a member of a club or organization, they want to become an officer or a leader, but they're kind of just scared to take that first step. I'm sure you've probably felt the feeling too. Like those things are definitely nerve-wracking. So where do you think or what do you think about to motivate you to take that first step? Or what advice would you have for people to overcome the hurdle of taking the first step?
I think my biggest advice would be to find a mentor or to find someone to look up to. When I was younger, and even still today, my mom is my number one mentor, my number one inspiration. But also within the organization, when I served on a national council, I worked with the national president very closely. And this was 2 years ago, but she became one of my biggest FBLA mentors. She became my greatest FBLA inspiration. And still till today, I still call her, I still meet with her to learn more about her FBLA journey, to gain insightful advice from her. So I do think taking that first step can be difficult. But if you can find a mentor, if you can find someone that you find inspirational within the organization that you're part of, or let's say it's student council, or let's say it's you want to be the president of a club, maybe reaching out to the current president or past presidents and forming that strong bonding relationship. I think that's really helped me And it's really helpful to have someone to look up to for inspiration.
I think
Hey,
it's really interesting that Josh mentions that there are so many different personality types and that some people prefer to not take initiative or leadership. And I'm just curious, do you feel as though that leadership is something that's almost an intrinsic quality for some people, or is it something that people can just naturally develop over time? I guess in short, what I'm asking is, do you believe that leaders are born or created?
I definitely think it's a mix of both because, like you mentioned, there are many types of leaders in the world. And I also think that being a follower is a leader. I think it goes both ways. Being a leader is being a follower, and being a follower is being a leader. And I know that can sound counterintuitive, but I'll put it this way. If you are a leader, you need to put yourself in the follower's shoes because if you're not a good leader, if you're not understanding the needs of the people that you're leading, those people won't be following you for very long. And then if you are a follower, if you're not understanding the leader's perspective, if you're not able to understand the message that the leader is conveying, if you're not able to follow them, then it's hard to be a follower. So I definitely think being a leader is putting yourself in the follower's shoes, and being a follower is putting yourself in the leader's shoes. And going back to your question about are leaders born or are they created? I know that, like I mentioned, when I was younger, I was always very extroverted. I always had this drive within me, but I also think that it can be developed because throughout FBLA and throughout my leadership journey, I have enhanced my skills. I've developed my confidence. I've developed my leadership, my organizational skills, my communication skills. So I think it's all about initiative. It's all about taking that initiative to improve yourself, to learn from others. And of course, there are some qualities that we all are born with, but I don't think that's a limiting factor. I think we all have the potential, we all have the capability to be the change we want to see, and that can happen in many different styles.
Yeah, and
guys,
I kind of like that. Oh yeah, what's up,
there,
Alman?
there is a question in the chat.
Yeah,
Are
go ahead.
leaders born or built?
Okay, that's kind of what we're going on. That's actually what we're covering right now, so that
Yeah.
fits in perfectly. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give my take there too. Actually, so that's kind of going into what we're saying. So I think that, and then Yasha, again, if you wanted to add more to this, you can, but you definitely gave a point. I kind of think that anybody can. I think good leadership, everyone has to build. And with a lot of things, there's definitely you're born with certain, certain like aptitudes for certain things, right? But I genuinely believe that everybody has the capability to become a leader, a good leader. And I think a lot of people have to go through something to become a good leader. I don't think anybody's naturally for it, even with that aptitude difference. But I also do understand that not everybody wants to be leaders. Definitely, even when I was younger, I kind of had this thought process like everybody wants to be the leader, but for some people, they'd rather everyone should try their best and do their best, but the way in which you do that varies a lot between people. And so as you mentioned, I mean I agree with your point 100% with the whole followers are also leaders in their own way. We all have to learn how to become leaders somehow. I don't like certain things like being good at public speaking and all, being extroverted, being good around people helps, but the basic skill you it's still a skill you learn. And I don't now I'm about to take things in a different direction, and this might get into other things for you, Yasha, that I'm curious about. With the COVID-19 pandemic, like I considered myself a very social kid. When that pandemic hit, I felt like I lost all my social skills coming back, honestly. I was really struggling to talk to people at the time, and I think it kind of showed to me that even social skills are like a muscle, which you have to train, which you have to work at and build. They go away too. It's just, people have different genetic muscle compositions. They have different genetic aptitudes for skills. But now what I'm curious about, Yasha, is if you've been in FBLA since sixth grade, so how did COVID impact your life with terms of you still keeping your entrepreneurial spirit? How did you cope with the distance? Things like that. I'm curious to hear.
So I actually love that question, Joshua, and I can relate to the fact that when COVID-19 happened, oh my gosh, I since I'm a very extroverted person, I love talking to people. It definitely was a challenging period because we were all in our houses, we were all quarantining. It was really hard to find that social interaction. So I would schedule Google Meets with my friends every single day during my lunch block to kind of replicate that lunch environment that I was so used to. And talking about FBLA specifically, I realized that, okay, we couldn't go to conferences. I couldn't attend my chapter's meetings. We couldn't network. It wasn't the same FBLA that I was used to. But I did realize there were a couple things that I could take advantage of. and one of those things being competition. So I realized that, well, I had all this extra time on my hands and competitive events were still happening. So I decided to compete in the event business etiquette. And I spent months and months studying for my event. I took all that extra time I had to prepare and work hard. And then I ended up placing first at states and then second in the nation. So I utilized that extra time because with me, FBLA has always been my biggest passion. So I had to get involved somehow. So I decided that, okay, if I can't go to conferences in person, if I can't network with other people and be the social extrovert that I am in FBLA, I'll at least take advantage of what is offered to me. And that the biggest thing at the time was competition. And even though conferences were virtual, there were a lot of videos posted by the state officers at the time. And there were still a lot of ways to get connected with the organization. So I tried to take advantage of all those opportunities presented to me.
I think that's really great that you were able to do that. I'm also curious as well. In terms of public speaking, what tips would you give to somebody who was nervous with public speaking? I think being able, after abstaining from actual like social and like physical contact from people for like so long, I think it's really interesting the initiative that you took and were like able to do things in spite of the hurdles that were in front of you. And I know that even generally outside of the pandemic, people tend to struggle with public speaking or just conversing with other people. So I'm curious as to if what tips or consolations you give to yourself when you are a public speaker or when you get nervous in regards to situations like that.
I think with public speaking, like Joshua mentioned, it is definitely a muscle. I think public speaking requires practice. I know when I first joined FBLA, my public speaking skills were definitely not to the level that they are today. But I do think that half the battle is really courage. I think if you're able to put yourself out there, because once you're on the spotlight, you just have to talk, really. I think public speaking, and I remember I attended this presentation, and the man who was presenting, he told us that public speaking is people's number one fear. Like people are more afraid to public speak than they are of anything else. And I really found that quote interesting because I can see that in the world around me. I know not everyone is extroverted. There are a lot of introverted people, but I do think that courage and then being confident in yourself, these are my top two tips. And this is what I tell FBLA members when I travel to present workshops. I think it's all about putting yourself out there, again, taking the initiative to put yourself on the spotlight, try something new. Because at the end of the day, I think we make it a bigger deal in our heads than other people do. So just having that confidence within yourself, I think affirmations are a really big role as well. Telling yourself that everything's going to be okay. Just public speaking, I'm just talking to people. So you just have to get yourself on that stage or wherever you are public speaking, getting yourself to that point, and then after that, you just have to talk. That's really it.
Yeah. I agree with the whole sentiment surrounding confidence. I think people tend to overlook it, and it's something that's articulated to us from such a young age. And I think that people, like I said, they tend to overlook it and they don't realize how much confidence can contribute to our daily lives, not even just in public speaking, but it can really get you through the day and ultimately help you achieve so much more than you would if you weren't confident.
I
Yeah, and
agree,
I'd
and I
actually oh, go
oh,
ahead, Yasha. No, you continue.
Oh, I was just going to add, I tell people that we public speak every day because I know a lot of people, they think of public speaking as something like this or going up on a stage and talking in front of people and holding a microphone. But we are interacting with people daily. And that's what public speaking is all about. It's about how well are you able to communicate with others. And I think that mastering public speaking at a young age is going to be so helpful, not only in the workforce, but also in your personal life because being able to articulate your thoughts, that's really all public speaking is about, is just being able to confidently articulate the message that you want to share. So I think really mastering that skill early on is such a helpful tool later on in life.
No, and I mean, you actually kind of covered it. What I was about to say right after Yasha, but I like to. This is something I definitely want to add to, because especially in the light of FBLA, like public speaking's been the event I've been doing through FBLA. So when I think of public speaking, I immediately think of this organization, and that's the biggest thing. I think the most like if I had to, in my top three most nervous experiences in my life, presenting my first like speech for FBLA for public speaking was number one because I've been someone who's enjoyed public speaking and been able to do it, but I think the scariest part is when you're being judged by a judge who they are evaluating how you're doing. And so I guess my kind of piece of advice here now, if you're doing a public speaking competition, it's different. But I think that I was so nervous because I was being judged. And I know people say this, but people go into all their public speaking as if they're being judged like it's a competition, like someone's keeping a scoreboard. But in real public speaking, if you mess up the word, you just, you know, continue talking or say it again. I think a lot of people that if you're already a good socializer, you just need to completely reframe in your mind what are you even doing because you're not trying to give like a perfect speech that's being graded off a rubric necessarily in the real world. You're trying to just convey your emotion or thought. Stumbling over a word and then correcting it does not change how well you convey your thought. And I definitely agree with you about learning it at a young age because I think the biggest thing I've noticed, right? First off, public speaking definitely translates everywhere. It's not just giving a presentation in class, it's getting doing an interview, getting on a business call. Is that when you have those good public speaking skills, I mean, it can really compensate if you're lacking in other areas of skills as well. Because when people see that you have that confidence that you're able to communicate that information effectively, that's already a super valuable skill in and of itself. And I know this all started because of COVID, but I think what COVID really addresses in light of this is that overall, when we as people are getting stuck, when we as people like lose practice with public speaking social skills, it becomes much harder. So it's definitely something you have to train. I 100% agree on that. And I don't really have a question following that. That's just like my extra like 2 cents on it. I mean, one thing I that you brought we brought up before this that I kind of want to get back to is, you said you spent a lot of that extra time studying for your business ethics test during the COVID time period, which I wish I had spent my time like productively too when I had all that extra time. But, I mean, I guess we talked about it before. What made you a lot of people would say they just don't feel motivated to go through that much. So, in other than just wanting to stick with your FBLA community, like, what do you think was driving you during that time period to do those things?
I think the biggest drive was honestly wanting to learn more because I loved the topic business ethics. I was like, wow, okay, I can learn because in that test I had to learn about like international business. I had to learn about the customs in different countries. It was a very content heavy test. But for me, the goal wasn't just to, oh, I want to place at nationals or I want to place at states. It was that I want to learn. And I think learning is the biggest motivator for all of us. If we're set to learn, if we want to learn more, I think that's going to help with that drive and motivation and focusing on the journey, not just focusing on the end goal that, oh, I want to win this or I want to have this end result. It's what will I get out of the process of working towards that goal. And for me, that was learning more about the world of business, which has always been something I've been interested in, especially as I joined FBLA and got more involved.
Yeah, I mean, when we say leadership has no age limit, I think what you just brought up about wanting to love learning is really important because it actually reminded me. I think another issue that we kind of have when we're younger is because of school and certain people, like that structure of education style is certain fits for certain people, it doesn't. There's like a bad connotation, in some ways, like we don't want to learn, but I don't think people realize that no matter what they're doing, they're learning. It's just about what you're learning. So if social studies isn't your favorite subject, you don't have to turn the word learning into I just don't want to learn because that's like studying for school and all. It's really about what you want to do. I mean, even if you don't like going to school, but you love playing music, you're still learning something, or you love playing the sport, you're learning about that sport. And I think an important framework for people in light of what you're saying that I've been using too is going into something just doing it because you love learning it. Don't even look at the end result. Because if you do it because you love learning it, regardless of what the end result, you're going to end up enjoying what you did and you're not going to regret doing it at all. And I mean, Emily, I'd like to hear your take on that too. I mean, like, what are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I was actually just thinking about how even through learning, it's something that it's limitless. It's not finite in any way, which I think is interesting. Circling back to Yasha's point of leadership has no age, learning is also the same in that sense because I think the world is just so colossal that there's really no limit to what you can learn or what you can pick up. Ultimately, it's just that it is in the palm of your hands and it is yours to go into and be curious about and ask questions about. I think there's just so much that an individual can actually like learn and pick up throughout their lifetime. And it's not something that stops once you're in your 30s or in your 40s and you have a set career goal. It's something that's continuous. But I am also curious, Yasha, about aside from this natural desire to learn, what do you think helps maximize like your success in FBLA or just any general pursuit? Like, what does your day-to-day schedule look like? I'm curious, or how does like your like what is like I don't yeah, like what does your general day-to-day look like? I was gonna go into another question, but I was like, no, I think I'll stick with just that.
I think like having like you mentioned before, like being able to not just do something, but also the learning and drive and motivation. I think the biggest thing with that is also goal setting. I think from an early age, being able to understand this is what I want to achieve, this is how I'm going to get there. And I think also taking things by the flow. I think every day, for me, every day is so different, not only with my work in FBLA, but outside of school. And I know all three of us were in school. I know our days look very different day to day, but I think it's about taking each day as it comes and seeing. And sometimes we end up in situations that we don't want to be in, like, last minute homework assignment or an essay that's due at midnight. I think it's just all about time management and taking each day by the flow. But for me, I go to school and then I have to wake up pretty early, go to school, and then I come home and then I look at, well, first I take some rest, I recharge, get ready for my work in the evening, and then I prioritize and I figure out, okay, what needs to get done today? What are my responsibilities? And for me, I think time management is a really important skill, not only with my work as a leader, but just as a student as well.
I agree. Time management is extremely important. And the way that I've heard it described to me and the way that I think of time management is that sometimes I think a lot of people they lack the motivation to what is it, distribute their time in a way that is disciplined and appropriate. And I think that can lead to procrastination. We don't have that motivation. But I think ultimately time management leads back to discipline and knowing that even if you don't want to do something, it still has to get done because they are your responsibilities. But I was just wondering, like, how do you find it within yourself to manage your time, or is it through more of a motivational aspect that you remind yourself what's at stake, or is it more of a discipline aspect where it's like you know what your responsibilities are and when they need to get done?
I
Okay,
think it's
really,
a
really
good.
quick, Yasha, and then
Mhm.
please like continue to answer the question. I just have to say this before I forget. To everybody who's listening, we also have the YouTube channel, which I've not been mentioning on previous episodes. But if you guys want to see, if you guys have to tune out and you want to see the rest of this episode uploaded later, or any of the past episodes with our other guests, just look up Through Their Eyes podcast, and we have a YouTube channel. It is gonna have all of the videos from all of the previous episodes for you. But with that being said, Yasha, you can go back to answering the question. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries, Joshua. But answering your question, Emily, with the motivation and then the drive, I think it's a good mix of both. I think discipline and motivation, both of those are really important skills to master. And I'm not saying that I've completely mastered them. I know that they are very difficult skills, and it is easy to get sidetracked sometimes. But I think it's also about looking at all the responsibilities that you have on your plate and converting it into a positive mindset that, oh, I'm excited to do this, or I know that getting this done will benefit me. And that's also why I think it's really important as a teenager and as a young adult to put yourself in activities that you enjoy. I know that when we were younger, we didn't have a lot of freedom with what we wanted to do or how we want to spend our time. And I know even in high school, there are some required classes that we take, even as you move on to college. But I think as we get older, we are granted more freedom, not only in school, but also with how we want to manage our time. And I think putting yourself in activities, putting yourself in communities that you enjoy being a part of is really important because then you are going to find that drive. You will be happy to do your responsibilities. For example, if you are in a club that you really don't like, but you have a leadership position, you're still responsible for getting everything done. You're going to want to procrastinate. You're not going to want to complete your responsibilities. But if you're in an organization that you love, you're going to be eager to take that initiative and do more than what's required because of your passion and drive for the community and for what you do.
I think that's really well put. I agree. I think finding things that you are passionate about ultimately will allow for you to find that drive within yourself. And I think also leadership in and of itself may also be a motivator because you recognize that people rely on you, and that also makes you want to be more ambitious and get things done because you know that there's a certain level of dependability there that you need to what is it, maintain. But I also did want to say to everybody listening that you can also call in at 919-518-9773 or Computers 2K Voice on Skype if you do have a question or a comment. I just wanted to intercept and say that very quickly.
Then I actually wanted to add a point here too, because I think the whole discipline versus motivation and like what motivates you in each of those categories is a really important subject. I think one thing I want to add too is like Yasha mentioned, right? Is even if you're in a position maybe for like a club you don't enjoy or anything, which ideally avoid that situation so you can be passionate. But there are times even when you have to do things you just don't want to do, and I think people don't. And we can actually even talk about mindsets off of this, but I think people view doing things they don't want to do in a very negative outlook like it's useless, and they don't realize the value that just pushing yourself into something uncomfortable that you were not ready for, did not want to do, it always grows you as a person in both doing things you don't want to do and things you want to do. And I think it's really important, especially for teenagers, to shift their mindsets a bit and be like, if there's something I have to get done and I don't feel like doing it just because you don't feel like doing it is very good for your own self-development and growth, because at the end of the day, a lot of things in life we don't want to do, we still have to do it, and the more you push yourself to go through that discomfort, the easier those things become to do, which it's counterintuitive, but going through harder work makes things easier going forward. So I definitely think having that kind of like delayed gratification, waiting for the long term kind of mindset is really important. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, Yasha, too. So I know you did a talk previously on about like fixed mindsets, and I don't know if you can just give me like either a brief synopsis of what that talk was about, or just like tell me as a whole, what are your opinions? What do you think? And almost like choose your question here. Like either what do you think causes people to fall into a fixed mindset, or how do you think people can break out of a fixed mindset? What do they need to see, hear, or do?
So that's a very deep question, but I love it, Joshua. And like you mentioned, the talk that I gave, it was a TED talk on breaking the bubble of fixed mindsets. And I'll go for your second question there. I think that the biggest thing that I've noticed or that I've seen is it's the challenges that put people in a fixed mindset. I don't think it's like your everyday life or everyday scenarios that'll cause people to go into that fixed mindset. I think it's when you hit those really tough challenges, when you feel like you're at rock bottom, that's when you start shifting into that mentality of, oh, I can't do this, or oh, I should just give up. And then every single time you encounter a challenge, then it just becomes a habit of going into that fixed mindset. And then it gets really hard to break out of that and develop that growth mindset. But I think going back to our conversation on learning, I think viewing every single challenge as a learning opportunity is a great way to not only break out of that fixed mindset bubble, but keep yourself in a growth mindset. And I'll give you an example. Last semester, I took calculus, and that was a very challenging course. And especially with all the other responsibilities I had, that course definitely tested my abilities and tested my mindset as well. But I think early on, I viewed each challenge as an opportunity for growth and learning, and I started to view the course in a positive mindset. So I wouldn't walk into class and feel like, oh no, I have to do calculus. I'm not ready for this. It's about having that growth mindset and telling yourself that you can. Because I know it may sound cheesy, but those affirmations really do have such a big impact. And I was able to end the course successfully. So it's all about your mind, really. It's all about how you train yourself and how you view the setbacks and challenges that are presented in front of you. And most importantly, how do you grow from them? How do you emerge from those challenges?
I completely agree with you, Yasha. And what you mentioned at first, I think, well, in one of my classes when I was taking last semester, I believe, I think there's a term for that. It's learned helplessness, where somebody, even when faced with a challenge, they, and even when they are given the what is it, resources that they may need in order to actually surpass said challenge or tribulation, they still think that they can't, or staying in a fixed mindset, as you would put it. And ultimately, people stay within that, or they learn helplessness because they feel as though they weren't successful initially. And so they will never be successful no matter whatever comes into play, whatever factors are at play. And I think it's really important, as you were saying, for people to view things as a learning experience, or to just change their mindset surrounding it, or just generally developing some form of self efficacy, knowing that they can do it. Even if they fail at first or initially, or don't perform well or at their standard, they can still do better the next time. Like, I know it may seem trite, but ultimately, there is always room for growth and there always is room for change. And it really is ultimately about your mindset.
Yeah, and that actually gets me, I think a quote it kinda reminded me of, which I'm not gonna quote this specifically because like, this concept gets brought up in a lot of different areas, but people bring up the point too, like, the pain of regret, of giving up, always outweighs the pain of just trying and pushing yourself, and I think that, something that people need to almost think is, when you get faced with that immense challenge and you kind of fall into a state of helplessness, staying helpless and giving up is not even the easier way out. I mean, it's the less work way out. But I think that honestly, having that like internal regret and being mad at yourself hurts me a lot more than knowing I could have taken this challenge head on and overcome it. And I actually, another thing that happens to people too that we didn't really touch on is, some people just get, the basic, I'm just my genetics or the way I was born, or I'm just not good at this class. I'm just not good at this or that. And in this light of the same context, Yasha, like, there's always, for example, some people genuinely, like, I would consider myself someone who does not have a great aptitude for like social studies classes or history classes. I do prefer like math classes, straight answers. But people that then start to struggle in those areas when they have to get something done, they kind of rely on that. They fall back on that. And when people get stuck in this trap of, I wouldn't say trap, I think people do have genuine aptitudes, but when somebody kind of starts to, you know, feel helpless and make those excuses, what would your advice be for them? Like the kid who's failing an English class and they think they're just not good at English, they just can't fix it. Like, what kind of advice would you have for someone like that?
I think my biggest advice would be to not have the perfectionist attitude, especially when you know that you're struggling in a certain area or you're not doing your best. I think it's important to not tell yourself, like, for example, you mentioned a kid is failing their English class. The goal shouldn't be, I want to get 100 in the class. I think it's important to realize that instead of telling yourself, I want to be perfect, or if you're in a really, if you're in a bad situation, and you are trying to get out of that situation, I think it's important to see how can I grow? How can I improve? Even if he gets his grade up from an F to a C, that's he passed the class. That's an improvement. And I think instead of relying on the fact that, oh, I'm just not good at this, or I'm just not naturally able to do this task, I think we can switch our mindset to telling ourselves, how can I improve? Even if it's by one small thing, even if it's by like 1 percentage point, how can I do better than I did before? And then all those small percentage points will add up. So going back to that example, if that student, if he just gives up and says, okay, you know what, I'm not good at English, I'm just going to stop trying. I can't get an A in the class. Whereas if he had said, okay, I know I'm not doing so great, but my goal is to pass the class and I'm going to do whatever I can to pass, then he's going to be much more likely to work towards that goal since it's more attainable. So I also think that setting attainable goals for yourself and not trying to be perfect, especially in the areas where you're struggling, can help you not go down that fixed mindset or just rely on the excuse that I just can't do it.
No, that's great. And I mean, Emily, do you have any thoughts on that too?
No, I think I completely agree. I've been agreeing this whole time, but everything you've said, I feel completely resonates with me. And yeah, I think ultimately it's about taking it day by day and taking baby steps. Ultimately, improvement happens gradually. I feel like typically people have this tendency to assume that success occurs overnight, or they don't necessarily view everything that goes into it, the gradual buildup. And I think when we actually break it down in that way and let relay to people that you do have to take it day by day, they actually can conceptualize, oh, okay, this didn't happen overnight for this person, or I could do this too, or I could set this goal and work at it over time. I think that's really important for people to recognize that. But on a similar note, I wanted to ask Yasha, what goals do you feel that you have for the next 5 years or 10 years, or generally, what direction do you want to take? I feel like you've set such great virtues and qualities for yourself. So I'm very curious as to what you want to do with your life in the next few years.
For sure. And thank you, Emily, for those kind words. That means a lot. But with me, I definitely want to go into the fields of business and leadership. But my main theme or my main goal is again to continue this mission of making an impact in my world. And I hope, especially as an adult, I want to continue this mission that I've had of being a leader, making change, and like you mentioned before, Emily, being the change that you want to see. So definitely, not only in the career that I pursue, but in my personal life as well. I just hope to use the time that I have, use these experiences that I've gained as a leader, as a teenager, and then take these qualities with me to whatever field I pursue, to whatever my passions become later on as an adult. I think my overall goal in the long term is to just continue. I hope to continue to inspire people, and I hope to continue to make that impact and be the change that I want to see, not only in our world, but also in our communities.
I mean, I think that's just awesome. I definitely agree with the whole, when we're still young and we don't know where we want to go. I think you made an amazing point about how you want to just build those skills. Because I think a mistake teenagers make actually is specialization is important. Like, don't get me wrong, in some fields, like if you're trying to do something very niche, it's always good to build skills towards it. But in your case too, and this is something I just like love about FBLA in general, because for people who don't know a lot about FBLA, the competition range is very wide, varied. There's a lot of different stuff you can do, and I think that what's so great about that is people can build like these general skills, which while you're a teenager and you're not into this career world yet, and I think figuring out what you want to do is good. You need that self reflection, but you made a point. You want to focus on building those general leadership skills that will have that long term impact and can be applied to everything. And on the topic of figuring out what you want to do, I think people get kind of stuck in a paralysis almost, where when they can't figure out what do I want to do with my life, they kind of get stuck like, well, then I don't know what I'm going to do right now. And I just love that you made that point, because it's also really important for people to understand that you can commit your time right now to building the base of the person you want to be, and then you can throw in like the flavor of whatever you're going to do going up, growing older later on. So I think that was a great point that you made there. I mean, one question I would have to have building onto that point though is, when you say these things about how you want to build yourself as a leader now for the future, do you have any plans for other ways you want to incorporate leadership into your life in the future? Like, not, you don't have to like make an organization, but kind of going into college, have you already thought of any ideas where you think you want to incorporate leadership into your life?
Along with business and along with being involved in those sort of sectors, I'm also really passionate about community service and helping those that are in need. So I hope that as right now as a teenager, I volunteer and I try my best to make an impact in my community, but especially as an adult, I also hope that I can have the resources and I'll be able to give back to those in need and give back to my community, in any shape or in any form, and also one day hope to inspire others to take on that mission. Um, but also, I feel very grateful for everything that I have, and I want to use the skills that I have, use the resources that I have to benefit others around me.
I wanted to circle back about you mentioning foundational traits that everybody should have. I think that's really important, especially while people are young and may not exactly know what they want in life or have a certain trajectory for themselves. I'm curious as to what your opinion is on what virtues would you say, like, I'd say maybe like three that you think everyone should have? Because as we discussed earlier, of course, people have different personality traits, but what do you think is a universal set of traits that everyone should have going into life?
That's a very broad question. But I think I would say the three, if I had to pick three, I would say I think number one is flexibility. I think as teenagers and even especially as we become adults, we are going to be put in situations where we have to think quickly, where we might have to change our opinions and change our perspectives. But I think being able to be flexible, being able to change our mindset and adapt to the scenarios and the circumstances that we're put under, I think that's a very valuable skill for everyone to have. And then next, I would have to say public speaking. I think being able to, and again, not and it's not about being able to feel comfortable in front of speaking of thousands of people or being a full-time public speaker. I just think it's about having the confidence in yourself to deliver whatever your message is or whatever your thoughts are. Just developing that inner confidence to say, okay, I feel confident in myself and I am willing and open to convey my thoughts and convey my opinions to others. And then lastly, again, I think it would just be kindness, being able to be kind to everyone you interact with, because kindness goes such a long way. Even small things like saying thank you, smiling at other people. I just think that kindness is especially probably the most important out of the three, because we can do so much just as an individual, but we can do so much more together by working with other people.
I think it's really beautiful that you mentioned kindness, especially in relation to your philanthropic work where you talk about community and charity. I think kindness is very important and that we extend warmth to everybody, even those who are less fortunate than us or those who may not have had the same resources that we do. I think it was The Great Gatsby. I think it's like an opening. I think it was that book. I might be remembering it wrong, but I remember it was some work of classical literature that mentions that we cannot always pass judgment on people because they may not have had the same resources or been equipped with the same skill set that we have had. And I think kindness really plays into that because it allows for us to extend empathy to other people and recognize that we all come from different walks of life and that ultimately everybody has a different path and it's important to respect that but also recognize the human being within.
And I kind of wanted to ask a similar question to like what Emily just asked, but because I just think those questions where you kind of have to like choose your top three, choose your top five are just interesting. So I this is now switching completely because I was also curious about what your thoughts would be regarding the fixed mindset conversation we had earlier.
Mhm.
If you could give in like one sentence for each, just three things anybody who's stuck in a state of helplessness or feels like they're giving up should do, what would those, and in the context of, work and all, nothing serious, but what would
Mhm.
those three things kind of be?
So I think the first thing would definitely be communicating. So if you're stuck and if you're in a situation where you feel that feeling of helplessness, I think it's important to be able to communicate that to someone. You don't have to tell the whole world, but someone that you trust, someone that you know is going to be able to guide you through, or even someone that you trust to just be able to share. Because I think sometimes when we're in these situations, it can be really easy to like isolate ourselves and feel that, oh, I can't tell anyone about this, it'll be embarrassing or it won't come across right. So I think one is taking that first step to communicate the issue or the problem that you're facing. And then I think two would be to find the resources that you need to get out of this situation. And I think that ties back into communication, because if you're not able to communicate your needs, you won't be able to get the resources that you need. And then lastly, I think it's just about viewing everything in a positive light and telling yourself that this isn't the end of everything. Like this isn't the worst, like not developing this scenario as the worst case scenario and just telling yourself, just believing in yourself and taking each day as it comes. I think communication, resources, and then a positive attitude would be my three top tips.
All right, awesome. I mean, I think those are great, especially communicating too. I think what happens to a lot of people is they can undermine their issue, but if you have something you just feel like you can't overcome a challenge or roadblock, I think just telling somebody can even give you a sense of obligation to overcome it too, because now you have other people you want to make sure that you can prove that you can overcome this obstacle. And I think it helps support people, especially when they feel like they don't have a lot of support around them. So I think that's like a definitely a great point to make. I had nothing else other than that. I mean, I just when we're talking about these things like fixed mindsets, it's very important to me because I think that falling into a fixed mindset is something that people that are really succeeding, they kind of like forget about it, but you can very easily slip back in with like the wrong thing happening or, a big challenge coming up. having that motivation is very hard. But I also think people shouldn't overextend themselves either. If there's a situation where you just took on a little bit too much of a workload, I think that could be a thing too. And I'm actually curious, have you ever had a time where you felt like you were overwhelmed with what you had to get done, and how did you go about fixing it? Whether it's a literal fix like working on time management or like a mental fix, how did you reframe your perspective?
I can say that's definitely happened quite a few times because as a passionate person, as someone who again tries to make the most of their time, do the most for others, I think it is really easy to sometimes put a little bit too much on our plates and overextend ourselves. But I think in a situation where, well, if you're able to, cutting back on some of the workload that you have is important, recognizing that, okay, I need to step back, I need to reassess the scenario that I'm in and figure out if I can either delegate some of the work that I have or if there's any way I can reduce some of the workload. But if not, if you're in a situation where okay, you have to do this, you can't delegate it to anyone or you can't get out of this situation. I think it's really important, again, to have that perspective of this is something that's in the short term. And I know I'll feel much better about myself. It'll be a great accomplishment for me to get through this hardship, to get through this time where I've overextended myself. And I think sometimes when we do put too much on our plates, we realize that our capacity increases. We realize that, oh, wait, I actually can take on a little bit more. I can do a little bit more. So I think it's sometimes not always a bad thing to push ourselves a little too far, but it's also important to recognize that and learn from that experience.
I think having that balance is extremely important, but I also did want to circle back to something Josh had mentioned earlier about a communication and and talking about struggles that we may be undergoing and having support from others. I was curious as to how having a support system has helped you become the person that you are today. Like how has it helped you or made you feel or made you become more successful, do you think?
I think a support system is so crucial to anyone, no matter how big or small their goals are, or whatever it is they want to achieve. Because I also think it's all about perspective, and I think that sometimes when we are so caught up in a situation or so caught up with what we want to do, just sharing our troubles or just sharing what we're going through with another person can give us so much perspective. Because when we're stressed out about a certain situation, we're only thinking in this one, like a one road mindset, but being able to communicate with others and having a strong support system will give you that perspective and may even give you new ideas or new solutions. And I think picking a couple people that you trust, picking some people that you know will be there for you no matter what, I think that's so important to any successful person or just to any person in general, because these people are your foundation. These people are people that you can rely on or go to when you're in trouble or when you need any help or advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably gonna step ahead of the communication point. I mean, because you also had brought up sorry, I know you brought up resources. Do you remember what was the 3rd one again?
The third one was having like a positive attitude, positive mindset towards your situation.
Yeah, so when we brought up this kinda goes hand in hand. When we bring up the whole overwhelm thing, something I also wanted to make a point there is I don't think people so you guys know, like, progressive overloading, right? Like, people in the gym, like, progressive overload or, like, constantly increasing, like, the weight of your activity or the hardship.
Mhm.
And, I think people don't realize that the same thing applies to, like, your ability to learn, your ability to work. It's not just if I have something I wanna learn about or work I get done, I'm already, like I have a predetermined, like, capacity for work. I think people should realize that the more you don't wanna overpush yourself with anything. In fact, I know there's even a scientific study about, like, the sweet spot of challenging yourself, like, something like it should be 4% harder than, like, what you think your limit is, something like that, I don't remember, but the I think people don't realize when you push yourself to a certain extent, like, a limit during work, during hardship, you grow in your ability to tackle more work. I mean, I remember, in 9th grade even, a workload that seems so much less than what I had now felt equivalent in terms of the time it was taking up because you yourself grow, and I think people need to approach work like that. When you're stuck in a very challenging situation, understanding that if you overcome it, it's not like, "Oh, I'll never be able to, like, deal with something like this again." You actually grew in your ability to take on that work. So, that was just I think that point is very important for the whole positive attitude perspective on things. Now that we only have, like, 5, 6 minutes left, I do want to focus on kind of wrap up thoughts too. Like, what is your biggest message? I'm gonna just say one more time. So remember, everyone, we also have the YouTube channel now, Through Their Eyes podcast on YouTube. So if you want to see this episode that we just had, that'll be uploaded there soon. And then we also have past episodes. But now my final thing, Yasha. So we'll see how much time this fills in. What is your biggest message to the audience today? Like, what is something that if you could just tell everyone in the whole world you wish everyone could kind of know?
I think especially for teenagers, especially for young adults, because I do know that's where our this podcast is oriented towards. I think it's important to understand that we are in a space where it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fall sometimes because especially as young adults, as teenagers, this is our time to learn. This is our time to develop some of the skills we were talking about earlier, like communication, like public speaking, confidence. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to take a step back and analyze your situation. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in that mindset of perfectionism or I have to be the best at everything. But I think being gentle with yourself and understanding that mistakes is how we grow and not being afraid to take that first step, taking that initiative, because again, that is what leadership is about. It's not just about holding a title or having a position, it's about taking the initiative to make an impact with the surroundings that you're given and with the opportunities that you have. And then also being there for people and inspiring others to leave their world better than they found it and to grow and one day, become leaders in their communities. But again, there's always room to grow. And I know we mentioned this a lot in this episode, but we never stop learning. And learning doesn't just occur in the classroom. I think we learn so much from people. I know I've learned so much from the fellow leaders I've connected with in FBLA, and just at school, every day we're learning. So I think keeping that in our minds, knowing that there is another tomorrow, it's okay to make mistakes. This is how we learn, and being open to that sense of, oh, this is a safe space. Having that mentality and just being gentle with yourself, being flexible, I think really goes a long way, especially as leaders.
I really like that you mentioned that it is okay to make mistakes and that there is always a tomorrow because I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think people forget that a natural part of growing as a person and eventually succeeding is that failure because it allows for growth as an individual. And I think it's something that people may not always keep in mind. They always feel the need or to strain themselves to be perfect, but ultimately nobody is. And a part of life in general is just falling down and getting back up again. So I think that was really perfectly put.
No, I mean, I definitely think one of the biggest points we went over that like deserves to get recognition is learning to love learning and learning to love growing yourself as a person. I mean, you definitely embody it, like even with your message that leadership has no age limit. I mean, it's really important because there's teenagers out there now. This is kind of something we work on this podcast too. With like we had brought on the authors, we've brought on entrepreneurs and all is there's teenagers who have done these great things and when we have to look at why are certain people able to do this, there's obviously a lot of environmental factors, but I think mindset is 100% the biggest one. Just growing up always believing that it is something I am capable of doing, especially when I think the reason that a lot of people in the world, you face a lot of like backlash. There's going to be people that tell you you can't accomplish this or that, and I think it's just because genuinely they're already stuck in a certain fixed mindset, so they can't believe it. But if you know yourself and you push yourself through those hardships to aim to be someone better, I 100% think that it proves not only to yourself that you can accomplish these things, I mean, only to yourself. That's the only person you really need to prove it to an extent. And then, of course, do it for the sake of other people you care about too. But that's my final take on that. I mean, Yasha, do you have like any final yeah, I know you just said that long final message, so not really adding on to that, but more just like some quick advice, or if you have anything you wanted to like advertise, like anything you wanted to kind of just like promote or anything, like then that would be a great time to do that.
I actually wanted to add on to the point you brought up of that we are the only people we need to prove ourselves to. And I really like that you brought that up because I think that's so true. And I do think that, of course, we want to make the people around us happy. We want to make an impact for others. But I also think that it's important to realize we need to make ourselves proud first. And I think that's the most important thing. I think if we, no matter what situation we're in, if we've made ourselves proud, if we are proud of how much we've grown, proud of how much we've done. That's really all that matters. Because I heard this quote and it was that you are your only competition. And I think always having that mindset of trying to learn, trying to be the best version of yourself you can be, I just think that's the most important thing, especially as teenagers and as young adults.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Yasha. I mean, I had tons of fun with this conversation. It covered things that are really important to me, um, especially with this limited growth mindset, because that is something that I've gone through a lot of things within my life, and changing that mindset is so, so important for us to just, enjoy life. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today. I mean, it's like almost an honor for me because I'm just a member of FBLA. So I was so excited that I was able to bring on one of the state board members. And I mean, Emily, thank you for co-hosting. But everybody, please check out the YouTube channel, Through Their Eyes podcast. We really want to make that bigger because we might also be doing episodes on there too. And if Emily, if you had anything else left to say, you can go ahead, and then we'll be good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you, Yasha, for coming on. It's genuinely really nice to see somebody taking, like somebody so young taking on such a great leadership position. I think it's really like interesting to see, and I'm sure Josh also feels the same way. But we are very proud of everything that you've accomplished, and we're very excited to see everything that you will do in the future as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Joshua and Emily, for having me. This was amazing for me too. I had so much fun and I was able to learn so much from both of you. So thank you guys. Thank you for this opportunity.
That being said, thank you guys so much for listening today. Everybody have a great day, and thank you guys for coming on.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com and DeltaForce.net.